Taoiseach, in an interview published in this morning's Daily Telegraph, the DUP leader Arlene Foster had this to say. She said, "It has been deeply frustrating to hear people who voted Remain and in Europe talk as though we can't touch the Good Friday Agreement." She went on to say that things evolve, even in the EU context. She said there's been a lot of misinterpretation, holding the Good Friday Agreement, up as a sacrosanct piece of legislation. Taoiseach, such comments are not just unacceptable and wrong, I believe they are in fact dangerous and reprehensible. They reveal a reckless disregard for the peace process, for prosperity and for progress. It should be remembered, of course, that Arlene Foster left the Ulster Unionist Party in 2003 because of her opposition to the Good Friday Agreement, and it appears that the DUP leader has learned nothing in the 15 intervening years. It's entirely wrong to describe the Good Friday Agreement as a piece of legislation to be altered or changed on a whim. It is, in fact, an agreement between all backgrounds and strands of political outlook in the North and in the South. It is a fundamental component of the constitutional landscape of this country, and it is also an international treaty between this state and Britain lodged with the United Nations. It is, Taoiseach, the People's Agreement and not a chip to be bargained with. Perhaps the DUP leader needs to be reminded that this agreement was endorsed by the overwhelming majority of citizens on this island, by over 70% of the electorate in the north, by 94% of voters in this state. It was the first time since partition that nationalists and unionists, Republicans, voted together in common cause. The second such instance, incidentally, was the Brexit referendum. The DUP rejected the Good Friday Agreement, they embrace Brexit, and on both counts they act in defiance of the democratic wishes of the people in the North. So I want to make this very clear, Taoiseach, that the Good Friday Agreement is not up for renegotiation as part of Brexit. It is, in fact, sacrosanct. And the best way forward for everyone on our island is not to dismiss the agreement, but to embrace it. So instead of play-acting and pandering to extremes, the DUP should fully commit to the implementation of that agreement rather than seeking to undermine it. It should stop denying citizens rights, and that, of course, would unlock the pathway to re-establishing the North's institutions. Last year it was agreed that the Good Friday Agreement must be protected in all its parts. So will you agree with me, Taoiseach, that this is not only absolutely essential, but it is non-negotiable? Will you agree with me that the Good Friday Agreement is in fact sacrosanct and will be protected in all of its parts?
Thank you, Deputy McDonald. Taoiseach.
I want to thank Deputy Dáil for the question, and this is a very important matter. I think everyone in the House will agree. I want to say that the Government stands by the Good Friday Agreement and will defend its primacy. And we see our role as the Irish Government as being co-defenders of that agreement. And I don't think we should forget all that has been gained from the Good Friday Agreement. It may not be operating as it should be at the moment, but look at what has been gained. Peace in Britain and Ireland, power sharing most of the time in Northern Ireland, and ever closer cooperation between North and South. It is not a piece of British legislation. It is, as Deputy McDonald says, an international agreement between the British and Irish Government, as well as a multi-party agreement among the various parties. And it's an agreement that was put to referendum, adopted with over 70% support in Northern Ireland and over 95% support in this state back in 1997. While it may be factually correct to say that the Good Friday Agreement, just like any international treaty or agreement, could be changed, it could only be changed with the agreement of the British and Irish Government, and could only be changed with the consent of the people of Northern Ireland, and indeed cross-community consent at that. It is not something that can be changed by any one political party or by any one government. And certainly, as far as this government is concerned, the Good Friday Agreement is not up for negotiation in these talks over Brexit.
Thank you for that response, Taoiseach, and I wish to echo your sentiments in respect of the achievements of the last 20 years. And I think all of that should be acknowledged in spite of the fact that the institutions are currently not operational. I think it needs to be acknowledged also that in order for power sharing to work, in order for the institutions to be re-established, the spirit and the letter of the Good Friday Agreement must be embraced in its totality. I welcome your confirmation that Good Friday is not up for renegotiation or change on the basis of Brexit or to facilitate the extremes of hard Brexiteers. Can I ask you, Taoiseach, when you take to your feet again, to respond directly to Arlene Foster, to respond directly to the leader of the DUP, and to insist of her as a political leader that she respect the Good Friday Agreement, that she respect and in fact becomes part of the full implementation of that agreement.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
I know Arlene Foster for many years, and she's a woman that I like and respect, and I had the opportunity to be her counterpart for 3.5 years when we were both responsible for tourism on the two different parts of the island, and worked very well together when the Good Friday Agreement was operating. And I would say to any political party in Northern Ireland, or indeed on these islands, that we should all respect the Good Friday Agreement, and we should all work as hard as we can to make sure that those institutions are back up and running again. The Assembly giving expression to the democratic will of people living in Northern Ireland, an executive so the decisions are made, not by civil servants or politicians in London, or not made at all, made in Stormont in Belfast where they should be made, and so that we can get the North-South bodies up and running again. The bodies still operate, but the North-South Ministerial Council does not. And I think that's of great regret when we're talking about important projects ranging from the A5, which is important in connecting Derry and Donegal to Dublin and to Leinster, whether it's the North-South Interconnector, whether it's about all the issues that arise as a result of Brexit. I think we could much better manage those if we had those institutions up and running. And I would call on everyone to respect the agreement, to respect the decision of the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland, to embrace that agreement and to make it work.